There's a lot to work with here.
Oh, there is. It's I was a riveting round of footy. We had Collingwood and Sydney sitting on the sidelines, but 8 games that I thought the matchups looked brilliant on paper, and we found out about a few. Some are 4 games in, some are only 2, as you said, with the ladder. But yeah, it's starting to take shape for us, I think.
The buck stops for Victoria Police, made for more search police careers.
Oh, look, Matty Rowell for me. So out of the entire 8 games, out of all of the players that took the field, he just jumped through the TV screen for me. And it's not just what he did on the day. It's actually when you reflect on where he has been and the journey that he's travelled. You know, his first 3, did he get 3 BOGs in his first 3 games in his first year?
Did his shoulder, yeah.
And so that's where he's come from. So we know he's always been high talent. We know that he's always been a footy nut. You know, some of the vision that we've seen, shorts up, tucked in, walking around with a notebook. Like, no one could love footy more than him. No one could want to succeed more than him from what we've been told, from what we've seen, from the anecdotes that have come through. He has changed his genetics. You can't change your genetics, but he has worked against his genetics to become a modern day midfielder. And there's an argument to suggest that he wasn't when he first came into the system. His physical status was strong, heavy, and inside. I think he's, and I'm assuming a lot of this, but I think I'd be on the money. I look from the outside in, and I think he, like 2 or 3 years ago, he realised where the game is going. He's coached around it, and he has put a plan in place to adjust his training, his attitude to the game, and what he wanted to become. And I reckon he's probably the type of bloke that would have put a picture of a player, and had a plan there, and had positive attributions on how he wanted to visualise running away from, I think he might have been running away from Sparrow on the wing out of a stoppage in the middle of the third quarter, and actually covering yards to be able to go and penetrate inside forward 50. That's not the Matty Rowell that came into the AFL. He was an in and under, and he's still doing the in and under strong work, but now he is breaking the lines, and he can cover distance, and he is adding to run and carry, which if you can't do that as a midfielder, well, then you isolate yourself as an in and under. So he's put himself in a position with his physical status and his physical preparation and his shift in what he can do physically to show us the entire raft of his football talents. And you can only do that by being an absolute maniac about what you think your end goal needs to be. And all credit to him. Like, it doesn't happen by accident, and you can only imagine the blood, sweat and tears that's gone on behind. But he has shifted his physical status to improve his contribution to his team. And I'm so looking forward to what he puts together in the next 3, 4, 5 years, because if he can do that in such a short space of time, then he's just, I find that exceptional.
No wonder everyone wants him.
He's averaged 33 touches. He's averaged 17 contested possessions. He's had inside 50s, 9 and 8, but they've had a fair bit of territory. His ground ball gets, he's equal 5th in total clearances at 23 for the season. He's only played 2 games. The other 2 players are on 23. Cherry has played 3 games, and he's around them all the time. And Libba, who's played 3 games. Yep. So that's the company that he's keeping. The tag team of he and Noah Anderson is pretty strong. They're going to take a little bit of beating, and Tuke Miller sort of running around now. He's kicking goals. So it was Gold Coast couldn't have started the season any more positively. They've been spruiked, and now they've followed through for only 2 games. But we get Adelaide up at People's First this weekend, which is going to be fascinating viewing.
Rowell polled 25 Brownlow votes last year in a team that won 11 games. He's more of a player now than he was then, and they're going to win
Correct.
more than 11 games. So don't sleep on that. The buck stops Matty Rowell looking for a career that gives you more. Search police careers, Victoria Police made for more. I thought we'd take the big issue as what did we learn out of Hawthorn and the Giants? Stacked heavyweight encounter, deeply intriguing, tactically and in the way that played out. This was your game. Tell us what we learnt.
Well, we've got to acknowledge the wind and the conditions first and foremost, which I think they're difficult conditions, but I think it highlights, I suppose, the connection between coaching and playing. And in game, I think we saw real-time learning, both in the coach's box and on the field. And that is really what coaching is. All right, so take all the information. This is what we're trying to do. This is what the opposition are doing. This is what we're doing well, and this is what we need to improve to give us a chance to win, which is fair enough done in the coach's box, but then you need to translate it onto the field. I think Hawthorn have shown in their first 4 games that the connection between what the coach and coaches see and what they feel needs to happen in the game and their ability to communicate that, but then for the players on field to pick it up and to run with it, because there's absolute belief and clarity in the messaging and then the action of that message. So we saw that between the first and third quarters. The Giants, the Hawthorn didn't play well in the first quarter, and the Giants played really well. They had the wind, and they 5-7, I think it was, in the first quarter, but they left a gaping hole through the middle of the field. We didn't see that after quarter time, and we definitely didn't see it in the third quarter when we assumed that the wind was quite similar. There wasn't much of a drop off, but the way the first and third quarters were played was profoundly different. So Hawthorn had to withstand, Finn Callaghan, who was, playing great football, and they threw McGuinness to him only for 5 or 6 minutes at the end of the first quarter. And I think for one other time for a 5-minute period, which that's an evolution, to have a tagger in your back pocket, but not to waste him for 4 quarters, but to only use him in times of momentum against. Yeah, that's another thread of coaching that we haven't seen before. McGuinness is playing as a legitimate forward on his own. He picked up 25 touches. He's kicked a couple of. He's hit the scoreboard 2 or 3 times out of the 4 games. So he's a forward in his own right. But you can still break glass in case of emergency. But I thought their team D was the thing. Their backs were caught back shoulder in the first quarter. They popped to the front slightly in the third quarter. Their mids hunted the ball too much in the first quarter. They were prepared, or the Giants play with the ball, they were prepared just to sit back 10 or 15 metres, and they filled that void that they gave the Giants in the first quarter, and it totally changed the dynamic of what their up breeze quarter looked like in the third quarter.
So what does it tell us about Hawthorn and their trajectory? Like this, so they're 4-0.
Yeah.
They've been winning in different ways, different levels of impressive.
Yeah.
This one on Saturday night was the one to go, okay, that stamp them as a top 4 team.
I think it reinforces what we've already seen. I don't think the win against Sydney was any less meritorious. I don't think that, even being able to just hold Carlton at certain times and finish the job. I mean, I think that what it displays to me is they have won in nearly 4 different ways. I mean, Newcombe has been significant for them in the first 3 weeks. They're without Warple, no McDonald in there, and Newcombe has 6 touches in the first half, getting really well tagged by Bedford. Now, he came good and had 10 in the third and was a part of their dominance in the second half, but they have been relying on him, but they didn't need him. Will Day stood up when it really mattered, and he's been excellent throughout. I thought Weddle was huge, but what it says to me, it's a team that has great belief. I think in any game of footy, you nearly need to win it. In a high-class game of footy, you nearly need to win it 2 or 3 times. You can start well and assert dominance, but the opposition will always have a crack back at you. And then you've got to respond. You either find a way to answer that challenge or you don't. But I think Hawthorn seemed to have 2, 3, 4 ways of coming back and responding, and that's more than their opposition have been able to handle at the moment. And you've got to give credit for their contests and their pressure. After quarter time, they ramped that right up, and that's got to be fundamental to any team, regardless of your talent level, regardless of your skill or your execution. If you don't bring grit and contest, you're not going to be on the front foot. And Hawks were on the back foot in the first quarter, but they were able to turn it around.
Giants didn't lose many admirers, did they?
No, I think they were okay. It's interesting that they got outworked and outrun in the second half after 3 weeks earlier, like completely outrunning and outlasting Collingwood. And we saw, we felt that. We felt that was quite significant. And then they had that narrow win against Melbourne. I thought they were good, but geez, some of their forward line didn't fire after quarter time. Stringer looked dangerous enough early. I thought Toby Green still had a crack. Hogan was rusty. There's still a lot of upside for the Giants, so they haven't quite dropped them out of my seedings, mate. They're still one of the best four sides in the comp in my mind.
The Dogs ticker. He once famously said they underestimated the size of our hearts, Bevo. And he's got those hearts beating together at the moment.
They've had a couple of ribs taken out so they can fit that heart in, but I thought they were huge. They're as the one of your callers said before 9:30, Carlton had coached it really well. Like they started the game with that energy that they needed to, gave their first gives. It's as simple as it is. When you pick the ball up, or when you are somewhat under pressure, or you see a player who's in a better position, just give it. Don't even think about it. Just give it. And then trust that player will do the same, and then that player will do the same. That's what Carlton looked like in the first quarter. They made some great calls in terms of blunting some of their Bulldog strengths, but the fight that we saw, and the hard and fit nature of the players that Bevo just spoke about was what came to the fore. By the end of the game, Vandermeer, McNeil, Davidson and Dolan, who come in as a sub, they were the four players in particular who just kept breaking the space. If you think that Akers had the ball and McNeil was tracking him down over 25, 30 metres, and it was a great tackle, and just mowed him down. And then Akers, like that effort, Akers was spent. But I thought that they just broke the space and they just outran them, outworked them, and eventually wore them down.
They had to get a good start because their next 6 weeks they go Perth, Adelaide, Marvel, Canberra, Ballarat and Darwin. So the Dogs are about to hit the road, but they hit the road
so it's
full of ticker.
Freo, Brizzy and St Kilda.
So 0-3 is not curtains, but it is a deep well, and only good teams get out of 0-3, like really good teams. This is where Carlton find themselves.
Yeah, they're I'm listening to Vossi's presser. He just did not want to mention fitness. And I thought it was because if you go there, that's not a quick fix. That's not something that and we really won't know categorically whether Carlton have underprepared, because when you've come off a couple of years of not being able to produce or have total access to your playing list, and they made a couple of decisions to let some players go. Jack Martin goes, Caleb Marchbank let him go because they kept breaking down. They weren't able to, be available enough. That's the best. It's if you're going to be a professional, you want to be fit. You want to be up and about. So if you've got a cohort of 5 or 10 in your list that keep breaking down, well then you're playing with one hand tied behind your back across the season. So they made that decision. But one of the other not knee-jerk reactions, but one of the reactions you can do is to get careful, and you don't actually train at the level that you need to get the sort of volumes in to prepare well enough. You can actually get fitter through a season in terms of the game comes back, slows down a little bit, not as high transition, which I think suits Carlton. They'll be better in the middle of the year than they are at the pointy ends. But they were outrun on a fast Marvel deck under the roof by a team that's missing some players but have attributes to play high transition open football better than they can. It's not fatal. There's still Tom De Koning was excellent again, but he's quite clearly jarred up in that left knee. Paddy Cripps was a bit quieter. Walsh isn't quite giving us his best. Curnow was excellent early and then nowhere late. I like some of their sort of. I love Cottrell as a player. I think Akers runs up and down really well. I think Hollands is showing a little bit. They're just not putting it all together for 4 quarters, and they were clearly, in my mind, outrun as the game progressed. But the coach didn't want to put that on the table because as soon as that's in your psyche, it's a slippery slope for the next sort of 3-4 weeks.
So were there private conversations going on this week?
With the conditioning?
Physical preparation?
Yeah, maybe, but that's something that horse is bolted. You can't do your pre-season again. They go into a Thursday night game against Collingwood and it becomes massive. Like, what a big opportunity. Once again, they're projecting forward. How did we go with our Pollyanna last week on Wednesdays? We were
for a little while it was all right.
They were believing it for enough, and it's actually alarming that you've got that much momentum, and it's more credit to the Dogs really to be able to arrest that back. But yeah, look, they showed better. So Vossi's right in some ways, and the Carlton people don't want to hear this. They have slowly improved. The performance against Hawthorn, doesn't that look, 20-point loss against Hawthorn doesn't look too bad at the moment. But then they looked like they had the Dogs on toast and just run out of puff. I think the game comes back to them. I'm still trying to be Pollyanna, but there's too much going for them there for them to stay in this mire for too long. But they want to turn it around pretty quick.
Yeah, so you didn't have them as a top 8 team in prospect.
No.
And so I imagine nothing's changed in your mind.
Well, I didn't have Adelaide and Gold Coast in there either. So I think there's even some teams that have popped up above them that I would have. If you look at the modern game, you need run off the back in particular. Like you need to be able to transition in all phases of the game. Your high forwards need to get all the way up and all the way back, but you need run off the back. Adelaide is showing that, Hawthorn is showing that, Gold Coast is showing it, and St Kilda are showing it. If you have players who can break the lines, change the angle, and you can cut through the opposition team defence with legs, then you need that you need to tick that box. I don't know, outside of Sard when he gets going, I don't know where Carlton are getting that from. So that's a question they need to ask themselves in the depth of their list. Do we have to replumb, rewire, and move some players around? Have they got that? Sam Walsh was thrown up last week. Is he the type of player that could provide run from the back? So you don't burn energy on the inside. You actually go to the outside and you become a running player. They need to find 1 or 2 of those in the next 6 weeks to give them a chance in this modern game.
All right, the pressure index sits firmly on Carlton. Experience keyhole laser vision surgery at New Vision Clinics. Call 1-800-20-20-20. And they'll be a big part of our Wednesday chat because they play Thursday night. Maybe this is not an unanswerable question, but I'm posing it as an unanswerable question. If Melbourne don't have clearance, what do they have?
Well, they've got a lot of talent. They're not connected as a unit at the moment. I thought in the first 5 minutes the writing was on the wall. A couple of 50-metre free kicks against Stephen May, over aggressive. Initially switched off and dropped back, and then over aggressive to give a free kick away. First goal, Oliver kicks the ball out of Jed Walters' hands or out of Gold Coast players' hands, like just a frivolous little, petulant little action in the start. Another 50-metre penalty. Walter finishes. Langford, who had a great game, wins a free kick. The ball is 2 metres the wrong side of the mark, so he has to go past the man on the mark to get the ball if he goes and gets it himself. In good team footy, good teams don't force the player who's going to kick the ball or possess the ball next to go and get it himself. It just slows everything down. 3 Melbourne players run away from the ball, not to get it back to him quickly, to get the ball, to look to shift and to move and to catch a defence out of position. I'd hate watching it as a Melbourne supporter. It looks like you've got a lot of players with their arms up. There was a lot of 50-50 free kicks that went against Melbourne on the weekend, and that would annoy me too. And it would annoy me if I was a player. But you've got to look in the mirror and say, okay, what's our energy like? Are we absolutely committed to the contest? Are we sharp here? Are we making all the little decisions that are right, the 1%ers that make up a good team performance? Because I think when you're off on those, quite often the 50-50s go the other way. So I think that they were a victim of their own lack of attention to detail. And they got behind the 8 ball early, and then they were absolutely smashed in the area of the game that they have relied upon for so long. Out of clearance, Matty Rowell, Noah Anderson, Humphreys, who went into the middle at times, 3 centre bounce goals against in the third quarter. I think they were minus 20 in clearance in the end with Max Gawn, Petrarca, Viney, Oliver, Sparrows trying to tag Anderson. Still couldn't get it done. So, they've got some soul searching to do.
Do they look like a bottom 4 team?
Well, yeah, they do. They do. Their performance against GWS was pretty good, but they got done in that last play of the game. To get done by North Melbourne, not just done, but well beaten. And then you start sort of putting comparative this result against that result. Like, so Adelaide did what they needed to do against North and on their home deck by 40-odd points. North Melbourne beat Melbourne by 60-odd points. You think, okay, like Adelaide are playing sharp footy. Melbourne, you put Melbourne in comparison, they're not anywhere near playing sharp football. If you look at talent levels, they shouldn't really be that far apart. I like Melbourne's kids. They look great. And I think their leaders have shown that they've got great. Their level is huge. There's a lot of A-graders there. Oliver's come and he's a better product than he is the last 18 months. But they're just not playing connected team football. What's their purpose? What's their why? It doesn't seem to be there. There doesn't seem to be connection in the space between the players. Looks like there's 18 players running around as 18 units rather than a collective.
So how do you address that after 3 games?
Well, I'm sure they would have addressed it after the North Melbourne game. And that's probably the concerning factor. So the first 5 minutes of the next game, we saw Carlton respond. Yeah, even though Carlton lost that game, they responded. Their first quarter was the best quarter of football they've played this year. The first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of Melbourne's game, I don't think Gold Coast played exceptionally well in the first half. They turned it on after half time, but they didn't play exceptionally well. They were still finding themselves. They were probably there for Melbourne to come out and put a punch on their nose straight away. But they gave Gold Coast a 2 or 3 goal buffer in the first 15 minutes, and then the game bumbled around for a half, and then Gold Coast went up a level and it was done. They'll have those conversations, and there'll be a little bit around leadership and connection with coach. But we see it in Hawthorn. It's at a top level, and it's not quite there at Melbourne.
It was fair, absolutely, to cite the Sam Lawler casualty in that is Ruben Ginby wasn't cited from the match simulation. Michael Christian sat in the studio and explained that last week and also laid down the exact parameters which would, as it turned out, come into play here. So
just as an aside, it's amazing how many coaches that have a perpetrating player that haven't seen the incident, isn't it?
They'd all be telling the truth, wouldn't they, Bucks?
It seemed to happen when I was coaching as well. When I had a player that sort of that looked like they might get suspended, I hadn't seen it.
All right, so Rhyan Mansell sits with a 3-week suspension, and this will shape as a test case at the tribunal tomorrow night. You read the last test case especially well.
Yeah.
What's your read here?
I think it's going to be really hard for him to get off because of the note that was sent out, the vibe, Marbo, whatever it is. It's like the game sort of needs to put a line in the sand. The kid O'Connell who got knocked out, he went back with a flight late in the game against Geelong. And he is, I was talking about Nathan Murphy, about one of those fearless, put yourself in. Like he's already shown himself to be one of those. He's Irish kid, probably doesn't even really realise where the danger is and just goes into it. So I think that's meritorious, but I think he was going anyway. I think the kid was going anyway. This case will be a little different because if you're Richmond, you're saying, well, this is the first one where usually it's when the players are leading up to the ball and the player behind, when you can clearly see the contest in front of you and you're trying to create some space or move a player off a contest, whether you're going to go for the mark or whether you're angling towards body position for a ground ball, you move your player out of position. That's forward, that's in front. This one is the other way. So it's the first one the other way. So it's slightly different. If I'm Richmond, I'd be arguing that Mansell, despite looking like he knew where the contest was, you're disorientated. You're still trying to find the angle and the connection between where the contest is going to be and then where your body position is, especially when it goes straight over your head. It's a little bit more difficult to do. If he goes, should Wiedering have gone when he pushed Lynch into De Koning in the first game? Because that was marginal. Like there was a pushing action and Richmond tried to use that Lynch was pushed into De Koning. And I thought that was folly because I didn't think there was much of a push. I actually don't think there's much of a push with Mansell. I think the O'Connell kid was just going. And then how responsible is Mansell for the contact that occurred with Lynch's arm anyway? I think there's a lot of questions. I don't think Mansell did a lot wrong. I definitely don't think it should be 0 or 3 again. We're in that position again where there's got to be some middle ground where you make a stand. But I think way back when, I think Todd Curley got 7 weeks or something for umpire contact, 7 or 8 weeks for umpire contact, which was marginal but it was over the top and excessive. But it made an issue. It was a line in the sand, and we might be facing one of those, and you might be killing one to educate 1,000.
So is the game best served by this action being a suspension?
I think this is just a moment in time. I just think I don't think this is consistent. I don't think it's something that is consolidated. I don't think that it is premeditated. I think the game is extremely difficult to play. I don't think any of these players are deliberately pushing players into a contest to injure them, to harm them. I don't think it's an action that an unreasonable player would do. I think there's plenty of reasonable players that would think that that moving their direct opponent away from where the contest might be, I think that is a reasonable action. Should you know that another contest is in the area, that other bodies are in the area, and you're pushing them into them, I think that's asking a little bit too much. And once again, I feel for the young fella that's been knocked out, but I don't know how accountable Rhyan Mansell is to it. And yeah, it is a test case. I think he'll go, but I don't know I don't think that's the right thing.
So if he does go? What adjustments will players make? So is there a callous disregard with pushing at the moment? So you push to open your opportunities better up with no regard for your opponent. You just give them a shove and that gives you a better chance?
Well,
can the game operate if you choose to do that, that's fine, but if it all goes awry, we're going to hold you responsible for it.
Okay. Look,
could you contest without the push?
Every single stoppage, there would be 2 or 3 pushes for position that take place.
I agree with that.
So what happens if an opposition player is flying through a stoppage, or even your teammate is flying through a stoppage, and you happen to push a player to create space for yourself into the path of an oncoming player who's buzzing through a contest at clearance, blindsided, and they collect, and he happens to get knocked out? Does that make you accountable for that?
I would say that's unforeseeable.
So do you think this was foreseeable?
I do.
Right.
I think if you push an opponent directly into the oncoming traffic.
Do you believe that Mansell knew exactly where the oncoming traffic was going and directed O'Connell into that traffic?
I think he pushed him in a manner that was inevitable that he was going to end up in the collision.
Right. Yeah, well, I suppose that's – so is it on the burden of proof for the AFL to prove that?
Yeah. So
or is it we're just talking about what a reasonable player would do?
Yep.
And is it unreasonable to create space for yourself as a front and centre player?
So this is why it needs to be heard. What were Mansell's intentions here? So he's not contesting the ball in the immediate moment, but he's going to be contesting the spilt ball. So he's trying to open up space as opposed to propelling him. This is why it has to be heard. And I don't still know whether this is captured adequately in the laws or not, which is why it's an important test case.
Yeah, I think that creating space for yourself as a front and centre player with either movement or body position or taking or being able to position yourself or take your opponent out of it is part of the craft that we've seen. I think Jack Higgins is as good as any at it. We've seen front and centre players have done it consistently well. Stephen Milne back in the day. I see what you're saying, and we don't want players to be concussed and injured in those situations, and this player was. I'll be sitting like everyone else to observe it. I always go to the side of it's a bloody hard game to play. I don't think Rhyan Mansell intended to go and knock out his opposition or to injure him or to cause harm, but that's not what the AFL need to prove. The AFL need to prove, was it a reasonable action in the circumstances or was it unreasonable? But at the moment, the outcome has a profound impact on the outcome in terms of the injury, has a profound impact on the penalty. And for right or wrong, that's entrenched now.
If you were one of the two former players on the jury tomorrow night as we sit here, would you be guilty or not guilty?
On the laws as they stand right now,
yep,
it'd be difficult to get him off. Yeah. So I think that even presented, I would have to, if I was going to give a vote of not guilty on this or appeal upheld, I would have to be convinced, looking at different angles, and I got this wrong with the Hobbs staging one. It looked like it hit Rosie's knee. Went a bit early on that one before seeing the other angle. So you'd need to see all the angles. I'd need to be convinced that Mansell didn't actually that on the balance of it that he wasn't pushing O'Connell into the path of the contest. If I could see, and it could be argued that he was just pushing to create space for himself and that the push wasn't directed into the contest, well, then that would be enough for me to let him off, regardless of the outcome.
Yes.
But the laws might not, I might be shackled by the laws as they're written and the interpretation that was sent out only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So was it reasonable in those circumstances to push O'Connell? And so that's Mansell's going to have to be strong.
Yep.
And then Richmond are going to have to build their case around that.
I don't think they will be able to.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. The three-headed monster up front for the Crows just keeps delivering.
Yeah, well, if we sort of break that down, obviously Thilthorpe's fit and firing and looks up and about and looks imposing, doesn't he? I think it's the beard. It's a very Viking-looking vibe that he's going with. Fogarty's just continued to improve as a player, and Tex has always been a gun. He probably had 1 or 2 years there where he looked like he was gone, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. But that obviously, whatever was going on in him and for him physically, off field, whatever it was, he's come back from that and he's resumed the status that he's always had, and that is an elite ball user, damaging in the air, left foot, right foot. I think that at the moment, and then you've got Curtin, who's been playing on the wing and then sliding forward, playing second ruck at times. So Adelaide have bucked the trend. They're going for pretty much like a 4 tall forward look at times. Obviously, in rotations, you might have 3 of those in the forward line at any given time. But Walker gives them the aerial through the middle of the field if he wants, but then can still win the ball on the ground, can still turn on a dime, go onto his wrong non-preferred and lace up someone, and he's playing great footy. So they've done it slightly differently. They're moving the ball really quickly off the back, but remember the Dogs were going to play 4 tall forwards at one point, and we thought, they're going to buck the trend, because at the moment all forward lines have always been a little bit smaller. But, Adelaide are the ones that are actually doing it and are getting enough supply and enough effect from all of their key targets to be able to roll with it. That's going to ask a few questions of second and third sort of key defenders in opposition backlines.
Yes, we haven't seen them against a pressure-packed midfield yet, one of the lofty contenders, so that's the next phase for them. But
well, you'd suggest that with their tall forwards that they're going to have enough aerial, because Riley O'Brien's running around there somewhere as well, and he's just a big unit who gets in the way a lot, and he's awkward, but he just runs all day. So they've got enough height where if they do get slowed and their ball movement isn't as slick, they could still go long down the line and get a really good contest and speed up off that. So they've the tests will come, and it's their high end has always been pretty good the last 4 or 5 years. Yep. It's what can they do?
Tex does look sharp as ground ball pickups as well as what he's doing.
He's got some haters, hasn't he? He's got some haters.
A ruck contest, which he just opened up. If we think Cherry's as good as there is at the moment, he just removed him from a contest and kicked the goal from it. When
he does his set shots and that the punch on a 45, 50 metre kick and the trajectory, it's just pure. I mean, it looks to me like, when you play with pros and you sort of get someone that just hits it pure off the tee, and you just think like that just looked effortless, looked easy. The trajectory was right. It sounded crisp. There's a right to the left. Like that's how Tex hits, some of his shots at goal from 50 metres, and it's just pure. So he's a supremely talented athlete, and he's still showing us what he's got.
Preliminary final integrity. So they were our preliminary finalists last year, the Brisbane Lions and Geelong. The flow of the game mirrored what happened in September last year. Geelong dominated in the wet, and as it dried up, Brisbane got their game going, and Geelong couldn't get any access up front, as the third quarter in particular, where they were scoreless and the Lions had hit the front. Again, I reckon really high-end encounter. What's to be drawn from their long-term prospects from it?
Well, there's a slight worry with Geelong. They've got some young players that are coming through. I think that they'll continue to get better, but to lose 2 in a row, I don't think St Kilda have shown that their best is pretty good. Brisbane is still bringing that to the table, but it really was the first and last quarters were relatively even, but it was the second quarter that the Cats owned, and it was the third quarter that the Lions owned. And interestingly enough, hearing Fags this morning talking about having the chat at halftime, saying, we had a chat with the boys and we were really conscious of the wet weather performance that Geelong had against us last year there, and they really outplayed us. So we probably overemphasised the wet weather football challenge. But in a half-time, we realised it's probably not as wet and slippery as we thought it was. So let's start to change the angle a little bit more, and the players agreed, and then they dominated the game. So once again, those adjustments in games, the connection between coach and leaders on field, and then the ability to be able to go and act on those shifts and changes. It always describes when you're coaching a team that that believe in you and believe in each other and believe in the system. It's like an F1 car. You just a little bit to the left, and sometimes you can get an over adjustment. And Sam Mitchell was probably talking about that a little bit. Fags was definitely talking about that this morning. He's got no qualms of, and you need to be really careful with how much you emphasise something in front of a group like that, because they can go over the top on it and maybe lose balance. So it's quite clear that Brisbane have got that, Hawthorn have got that. And that's probably why they're the two standout teams at the moment.
They got that wrong. 80% less energy and carbon usage, battery-free, always compliant, huge savings, Smarter Light environmental exit sign. So Port Adelaide only had 92 contested possessions.
Yeah, I haven't.
Frighteningly low.
You'll have to go to Champion to see where that stands, but that's not what we know of Port Adelaide. I mean, when you've got Ollie Wines, when you've got a Horn Francis in the side, we had a Powell Pepper, Darcy Byrne-Jones, like Willem Drew. You expect to be able to win more of your own ball than just 92. the game has become a little bit more keepings off. There is a bit more of a want to go fast off the back, and Port Adelaide definitely have the elements of that. Young kids that have come into the team and are looking likely, but they're literally kids. They're less than 5-game players. Moraes, Berry, and even Evans, who's really only played a season and a bit. So they are young, but yeah, you need to be able to look after the little circle and win enough of your ball in there for the rest of your game to pop. And right when they needed to in the last quarter, Essendon wanted it more, were more desperate, ran harder, and won the critical contest, which lost Port Adelaide the game, and they'll have some soul searching into the next 3 or 4 rounds.
And the curiosity, the score review, which is an eternal portfolio.
So the Sam Darcy one.
Yep.
Did you think that there was definitive evidence that Wiedering touched it?
No. I think he probably touched it.
You know,
if you have to rely on something to go, this is the moment where it's touched, that didn't exist.
Well, so we don't have Snicko on a finger.
No.
You think that the chip in the ball would do that?
So apparently what will happen is the chip in the ball will tell you that the ball brushed something. And then you triangulate that with the vision and you go, the only thing that could have touched was the fingers.
Because is there a way of doing it where from the vision that you actually can draw a line through the middle of the ball and the trajectory that it's on, and does it deviate? Because I thought there was a little deviation, but whether that is seen as definitive or not, I don't obviously know. And there would be errors of perception. But surely there's some technology you could use about the trajectory of the ball and if it changes at the time.
At the point of impact.
Yeah, that it would touch a finger. Because I think that there was another one that I reckon was moved, but there wasn't. I think it might have been in the Adelaide game that it wasn't definitive. So they couldn't overturn it, even though I thought it was touched.
Yeah.
So it's.
So my question out of Friday night was, if the reviewer had come back and said, we don't have a definitive angle that shows the ball being touched, umpire's call, would we have blued about that? Would we have said that's not good enough?
We blew about everything.
Yeah. But would we have? Or would we have gone, actually, that's exactly right, is we think it was touched, but that's not the threshold?
I think we're okay. If who was I calling the game with? I think you were there, but I think we ended up coming to the point of that was a common sense decision.
Yes. The balance of probability.
Common sense isn't in the rules.
No, it's not. That's not the threshold.
But it's actually not a bad way to go about it. But I think that I think on the balance of it was touched, but there wasn't any definitive evidence. So it's the right decision, but not following protocol.
Nathan Buckley, what are you going to do with your seedings?
So I'm going to shake it up. I'm going to break the rules.
I love it.
I'm going to do a bit of Gerard Whateley.
Go.
I'm only going to put the undefeated teams in there.
Oh, great parameters.
So that drops GWS and Geelong out for now.
Yep.
For now.
Yep.
So I have Brisbane as the number 1 seed, and I feel no reason why they shouldn't be. Hawthorn are the clear number 2 for me, and they're probably, they're 4 and zip for a reason. They've definitely earned their spot, and they could well be challenging Brisbane for the number 1 seed in the next couple of weeks. I've put Adelaide at 3 and the Suns at 4.
Yeah.
And they play each other this week. So one of those teams are going to drop out.
You've solved it in one go.
So
Brilliant.
One of those teams are going to drop out because there's a question on who have they played.
Yep.
But one will drop out, and GWS play West Coast, and who did Geelong play? Geelong play Melbourne on Friday night. So they...
the play-out game. I love it.
So, 3rd and 4th seeds are going at it up at People's First on Saturday, Arvo.
I've kept Adelaide at 4.
Yep.
The Giants dropped from 1 to 3 by virtue of losing.
Yep.
Brisbane are solidly in 2, but Hawthorn are clearly playing the best footy at the start of the season, and that's enough to be hostage to the moment. Hawthorn are the 1 seed for me.
Brilliant. Well done.
All right.
Yeah. Am I getting the seeding things right?
Yeah. I love parameters and play-out games. Beautiful.
You can. What I'm working at is you can do whatever you want.
They are your seedings. Yep. You can do whatever you want.